Thank you very much. Yes, right, so this evening's talk is about programming your radios with CHIRP. For some of you, this might seem a bit like teaching you how to suck eggs, hopefully not, but it's basically, I decided to go right back to the real basics of how to get CHIRP up and running, because from having various evenings in here in the club, people tend to struggle with it and have various issues with it. So I thought I'll go right back to the basics, get CHIRP up and running on your computer, and then learn how to program the radios. It's not going to go into real depth in the actual programming side. It will cover it, but it's all about how to get you up and running, saving configs. Anyway, I'm preempting my talk there, so I'll get on with it. So, what will this talk cover? What is CHIRP? Why do I need it? And where do I find it? Where can I get it from? What hardware will I need to use CHIRP? Understanding serial ports, software drivers, and dodgy Chinese chips. That will all become apparent as we go through what that actually means. Getting it all connected and communicating with your radio. The basics. So we're going to cover off getting it all up and running, reading configs off of the radio, saving those configs, editing, rewriting those configs back to the radio. I've thrown in a very quick refresher on repeater operation, talking about frequencies, shifts, and CT, CSS. And that will become apparent why I've done that, because when it comes to programming the radios, especially with repeaters, again, that's where a lot of people get a little bit confused and things can go a little bit wrong. And then finally, putting it all together, and hopefully I'll do a quick demo. So, what is CHIRP? CHIRP is a free open source radio programming software that has been specifically developed for amateur radio use, so that people can program their radios using a single piece of software. It's supported by Linux, Mac, and Windows operating systems. So why do we need it? Well, programming radios can be a little bit confusing, time consuming, and if anything, a bit frustrating, especially if you're trying to program a lot of entries into the memory of your radio. And CHIRP is designed to try and make that task a little bit easier. There is just two examples of how to program radios. On the right is this is taken from the manuals. On the right there is the one for the Baofeng UV5R. And as you can see, there's an awful lot of menu pushing, lots of up and downing in the menus, etc., and that is all just to program one channel or one memory slot. And it can get really frustrating if you make a mistake halfway through that. And the one on the right-hand side is from a Yaesu FT8800, and if you actually sit there and read it, there's a lot of push this, turn that, move that, pull that, do that, and it's just like, really? It's really, really time consuming. And again, that is purely to program one memory channel on your radio. So that's the whole reason for using CHIRP, because there is no commonality across any of the radios at all. They all have their own bespoke way of programming these in. And so CHIRP is there to try and make this task easier and fairly common for all the radios. So where do you get it from? So you can Google CHIRP, or you can go directly to chirp.danplanet.com, and that will take you to the website where you can get it from. And the thing to look out for is the forgot my expensive pointy stick. you can look out for the CHIRP logo. So that's basically where you can download it from. So what hardware do we need to use CHIRP? There you go, exactly what it says there. So, well, hopefully you're going to have some sort of radio that you want to program, otherwise it's fairly pointless downloading CHIRP if you don't have a radio. You then need a computer or a laptop with a USB port, or if it's a really, really old radio, some of them will still support serial ports. But basically, most radios these days, it's all done by the last thing on the list, which is a programming cable, which you plug into your USB port on the computer. So before you do all of that, I'd suggest you check the CHIRP website for the complete list of compatible radios, and make sure that the radio that you have is actually supported by CHIRP, because otherwise you might end up wasting your time doing all of this if it's not actually supported by CHIRP. But there is a very, very lengthy list on the CHIRP website that says all the compatible radios. Quick word on the programming cables. Programming cables can be bought from eBay, Amazon, whatever your favourite shopping site is, for about £5 to £10, depending on which radio it is. They come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. That's the one for the Baofeng UV5R. I then have one for my FT817, and a slightly different one for my FT8800. So they all come in different shapes and sizes. Note the red note at the bottom. Cheapest isn't always best. Check the seller's feedback, and if possible, purchase a genuine cable, or one that has been at least reviewed and you know is going to work. It will save you an awful lot of pain. There is so many dodgy cables out there. You will spend hours pulling your hair out, wondering why none of it will work, and at the end of the day, it will be because you bought a cable for £1 because you thought you're saving yourself some money, and all it's actually really done is generated a whole load of pain for you. So that's just a...
It was about £3 cheaper than what I found out later was the actual proper one.
Yeah.
And that £3 cost me a lot of pain because it wouldn't work. And I have to send it back. It was usual business about getting the money back through eBay programs. And
Yeah.
it would have been cheaper to have spent the extra £3 in the first.
Exactly. There you go. Prime example there. So, word on the serial ports, the software drivers, and those dodgy Chinese chips. Hopefully, I won't be offending any Chinese people here, but. So the key to success with CHIRP is understanding your USB ports, how they handle the serial port allocations, where you find them in your Windows operating system, or other operating system, but this is mainly based on Windows because that's what most people use, and then ensuring that you've got the correct software drivers for the USB port. So your programming cable has an inbuilt USB to RS232 serial port converter built into it. So in this bit here, at the end, there is a little chip that sits inside there. And hopefully, when you plug that into your machine, as long as you're connected to the internet, generally, it should be plug and play, and it should download the correct drivers for your cable. Caveat. Prolific and the FTDI the most common USB to RS232 converter chip manufacturers, and both have reported widespread counterfeiting of their chips and their chip technology, and both have now implemented additional software measures in the new drivers or newer drivers, which will actually disable the use of the fake chips. So if you buy a cable and it's got a fake chip, you use the latest software driver, you'll find that it will probably disable the use of that. We'll come on to that in a bit more detail in a minute. So as it says there, if you're unfortunate enough to have purchased one of these, be prepared to do a bit of faffing with software drivers. So, where are my serial ports? Again, this is just to tell you that this is all based on either Windows 7 or Windows 10, because it's what most people tend to use. So I use them as the examples in this. So before you plug anything into your laptop at all or into your computer, the best thing to do is you need to find Device Manager on your machine. And the best way to do that is by using the Windows button down the bottom, which is that button there, or that button there. Windows 7 on the left, Windows 10 on the right. And just type in the search function there, Device Manager, and it should then pop up in the list of things that it's found with the word device in it. So up the top there, that's what you're looking for in both examples. And it's usually found under the control panel. If you know how to get there directly, go straight into control panel. But for people who don't know how to find control panel, this is the easiest way to find Device Manager. So, once you've located Device Manager and you've run it, you should get a screen that looks like that. And as you can see, what we're looking for is your ports here and the same over on the Windows 10. And as you can see at the moment, just see if that's focused that a little bit more. It's not particularly easy to read on here anyway, but this gives you a list of your serial ports on there. Two slightly different machines, but as you can see, there's some COM ports already shown and allocated on there. So that's where you find those COM ports on your machine. Sorry, I think that's as zoomed as I don't think it will zoom. Yeah, no. So that's what it should look like when you run Device Manager. And as I say, these little bits here, when you click on these little indented arrows here, it will open up and it will show you all the COM ports that are in there. So once you have done that, if you then plug in your newly purchased programming lead, you should find that a new COM port appears. So in this one, we can see that it's turned up there and it says prolific USB to serial COM port. And although it's difficult to read there, it says COM6. Make a note of that. You're going to need that later on when you use this. So make a note of it. And if I just step over this side, on this side, you'll see it says prolific USB to serial COM port, and that's COM port 21. However, if you notice there, I know it's a bit difficult to see, there's a little yellow exclamation mark there, which means it's found the fact that there is a COM port there. However, the yellow exclamation mark means that it's having some form of issue with communicating with that COM port. And if you leave it like that, it won't work. And that's when the pain starts. So having seen that, how do we sort out that driver issue? So slightly clearer in that picture there now. So we've noticed that we've got an issue with that COM port. So we need to do something about it and sort it out. So if you then right click on there, it will give you the option to display the properties of that COM port. Now, if you actually look in there, it says that there is a driver and it's using a driver and it's a prolific driver. It's got a fairly recent date on it, which is 2018, and the driver version is 3.8.28. And you think, well, that's the latest driver. Why isn't that working? The chances are it's because it's a counterfeit chipset and the latest driver has disabled it, and so therefore it won't work. So what we need to do is we need to update the driver. Yeah, yeah, downdate it. You're quite right. So what you then do is, after clicking on that update driver, it will give you the option, several options of how you want to do it. And in this instance, I've already loaded several prolific drivers onto my, in this case, laptop. To download the prolific drivers, you can either go directly to the prolific website and they will have all of their archived drivers in there. I recommend downloading some of the oldest ones, some of the newest ones. If you've got a counterfeit chipset, it is going to be a little bit of trial and error. But so what you do is, once you've got the drivers on your computer and installed, if you then click, let me pick a list of available drivers on my computer, you'll then see that those are all the drivers. I've already put 5 drivers on there for the, four drivers, sorry, on there for the prolific chipset. And it just so happens that through trial and error, I know that if I use this driver up here, which is dated 2009, it's just underneath the finger, the pointy finger there, it will actually work. So that's a driver it's running at the moment, which is the latest driver, and it won't work with that. But if I downgrade it to the older driver, it should then work. So you just select that, click next, and hey presto, the little yellow warning triangle has disappeared, and you can now actually see that that COM port is now working and ready for use.
God, is it as bad on Linux? Under Linux, so those drivers are...
I have to say I've not tried it under Linux, so you're probably trial and error, but I know definitely in Windows, as you can see, it's the case. I'd suggest...
If you've had to backdate to get a driver that works with a prolific chip, watch, it's going to change in the future, but watch out for Windows 7 updates. There's one of the updates that says, you want to update your prolific drivers.
Yeah.
If you've had to backdate
yeah.
to get it to work, you do not want to update.
Yeah, exactly, and that's a good point actually, Tony. If your CHIRP has been working fine and at some stage a Windows update has occurred, if you go into CHIRP and you start getting error messages in there or whatever, first thing to check is go check that driver and make sure that it's the one that was in there before and was working. So, at this stage, that's plugged in. Driver's now okay. So the actual next bit is actually getting back to the CHIRP, which is what we were trying to do in the first place. So if you go to the home page of CHIRP, that is where you'll end up landing. So the first thing to do is click on Get It. Yep. And you think, great, that will now just download it. No, we have to a few more steps before we actually get the software. So you click on Get It, and it then presents you with a list of things you can download. So we have the Windows one at the top, which is just about ready to be clicked on by the finger. You then got the Mac bit, and then further down the page, obviously that's not the whole page, I've just taken a screenshot of the relevant bits. There's the drivers for Linux, and there's also instructions on downloading them, etc. So if you click on the download, it takes you to yet another page. And when you get to there, it will then actually highlight in green what you need to be downloading. So that's, in this case, that is what you need to download. Now, you see in there, it's named CHIRP Daily, and then with a timestamp in year, month, day format. You'll appreciate why they do that. It's because CHIRP actually does update on a fairly regular basis. We'll cover that again a little bit later on. But that's why it's called CHIRP Daily, because it can actually change on a daily basis sometimes, depending on what the developers have been doing. They may have added support for additional radios, they may have bug fixed it, etc., etc. So it does change on quite a regular basis. So click on that. And depending on which browser you're using, you should get some sort of notification that it's downloaded the file. I use Chrome, and it downloads, you get a little download notification on the bottom left-hand side. IE, I think it comes up in the middle and asks you where you want to save the file. Sorry, Internet Explorer. Asks you where you want to save the file. And in Firefox, it comes up in the top right-hand corner, if I remember correctly. But either way, it should tell you that it's downloaded the file. So once it's downloaded, the reason I quite like Chrome, it gives you this option to show it in the folder, wherever it's downloaded it to. So many people download stuff, they don't really pay attention where it's downloaded it to, and they go, oh, where the hell did that just go? Which is why I quite like Chrome, because it says, take me to the folder that that's just downloaded it to. So we go to the folder. And as you can see, I've previously downloaded 2 other versions. So there's 3 in there altogether. And so the one with the most recent date is that one there. Now, when you go to install it, run it as administrator. And to do that, you need to right-click on the file and run it as an administrator. Now, the reason that's important is because I have known of some instances is when you've gone to install it, if you install it under a local account, if your account has not got enough privileges within Windows, when you come to run CHIRP, it doesn't run properly and you might not see all of the serial ports. So it's quite important to run it as administrator. Again, it will save you a hell of a lot of pain if you do that. So you click on it or you run it as administrator. Same as installing any other software, follow the on-screen instructions, except the end user license agreement, which nobody ever reads, and then just go next, and literally just use all the installation defaults. Again, using the defaults, it will save you any pain, because if you install it somewhere else or whatever, you might run into problems. Right, finally, yay, let's start using CHIRP, shall we? Yep, so you've now got your COM port, you've downloaded CHIRP, you've got it installed on your machine, so hey, let's get to work. Not so fast. If you, by any chance, have taken time between downloading it and then actually installing it and running it, or you, for some reason, you haven't followed the download and oh, I've already got that on my machine, I'll just run that. If the version is out of date, you will get this message, which will tell you that the version you're about to run is out of date, and it suggests you go and update it. Just follow the link and do exactly what I just said in the previous slides and download the latest version. And then, you know, that's it. You Yep, well, there you go. As it says, if you see this, follow the link and actually go and download the latest versions and install the latest version. There's no need to uninstall the old version. It will install over the top. Seriously, right, let's start using CHIRP. So, finally, got CHIRP on your machine. You've got your programming lead plugged in. You know where your serial ports are. So the first thing to do is get your radio connected up. So this will be connected into your laptop, and you want to connect it up to the radio. Now, when you connect it up, make sure the radio is off before you go plugging it in. The reason being is on a lot of the radios, the pins that are used to connect the serial port into the radio are exactly the same pins and lines that are used by the mic and the speaker if you're using an external handset or headset, something like that. And obviously it's got the PTT line on there as well. And if you plug it in when it's switched on, sometimes the radio will key up, go into transmit, and I've actually seen it where it's got stuck in transmit, and the only way to turn it, to get it to come out, even if you've unplugged it, is to turn the radio off. Yeah. Yeah, obviously, if yeah, obviously, yeah, obviously, if you're using something other than a Baofeng, you know, an actual like radio, then yeah, I would put a dummy load or an antenna on it. But if you follow my instructions and turn it off first, you won't have the issue.
Can I just make the point about if you happen for some reason to be programming old Baofeng, some of the leads had a slight ridge down where the two pins are. And you have to pair that off to get it to fit properly.
Yeah. That is a good point. It is one of the things is when you plug these in, make sure the plug goes all the way in and fits firmly. What Tony's on about is when they made some of these with the first lot of Baofengs, they didn't quite fit properly, and the plug used to stick out by, you know, 1/16 of an inch, and it would never ever work, and you used to have to like file a little bit off the edge to get it to work. So you've turned your radio on, you can then fire up CHIRP, and you get this rather uninspiring screen.
At least it's not blue.
Yeah, this is true. So you've now got that far, and so the first thing you probably want to do is, now that you've got the CHIRP running, your radio connected and everything else, you probably want to download whatever is on your radio first before you do anything else. And the reason for that is you have a starting point to go back to. After you've finished fiddling around with it and you've buggered it all up, you go, I don't know how this radio originally looked. So if you download whatever is on the radio first and save that, then you always have a good starting point to go back to and know that your radio is back to exactly how it started. So to do that, you click on the radio and then click download from radio. It then next presents you with this screen. So port, if you remember, that was the COM port that we saw the prolific serial port come up as. That's why you needed to make a note of it. This was obviously done on my Windows 7 machine because it's on port COM port 6. If it was my Windows 10 one, it would be on COM port 20T1. So next from the vendors list, you then choose the type of radio, the manufacturer of the radio. In this case, I'm using a Baofeng UV5R because it's what everyone buys because they cost 20 quid. So if you click on that drop-down menu on the right-hand side, it will give you a whole list of radios, ICOMs, Yaesu, Kenworths, you name it, there'll be a whole list in there. So start off by clicking and selecting the vendor. And then once you've selected the vendor, it will then give you a list of all the models that are supported. Yep. So again, if you clicked on here in the right hand side under Baofeng, it will come up with things like UV5R, one of those. It will also come up with UV82, which is one of those, slightly different from the 5R. And you just select whichever radio you want to use or that you're trying to program. You then, once you're happy with those settings, click on OK, and it will give you these wonderful instructions. We don't need to do that. We've already got a radio connected, turned on, and everything else. And hopefully the lead is firmly connected, and you know the radio is already on, ready to go. The whole bit of turn the radio on and the volume may need to be set to 100%. Never ever had to do that with any of the radios that I've programmed. Turn it on, just turn it on a little bit on the volume, and it seems to be sufficient. If anyone knows any different, happy to be educated there, but I've never ever had to do that on any of the radios I've programmed. And the thing, ensure the radio is tuned to a channel with no activity. I've never really had any issues with that either. It possibly is advisable, but I've programmed mine with it sat on TD and WH and. Yeah, it doesn't seem to make any difference. And then once you're happy, oh, by the way, you see a little box there. If you don't want to ever see those instructions again, you can just tick the little box, and next time you do this, it won't tell you to do all of this malarkey. So click on OK, and you should get, with any luck, if everything's working and the two are talking together, you should get this little progress bar that starts running across the screen. And that means that CHIRP is now reading the information from the radio and is going to put it into the CHIRP program. And while you do that, what should happen is the little LED on the front of the UV5R, again using this as an example, that should flicker red. So hopefully that should all work. And then at the end of it, once it's finished doing its stuff, you should get something that looks like that on the screen. So what this is showing is the location is basically the radio's channel number. On a UV5R, there is 128 memory slots, which are numbered from 0 to 127. So you've got 128 of them. And this is basically those numbers. Obviously, again, I've cut the screen short, but it will go down to 127. This is what I've already programmed in there, which is why there's some stuff in there. If it's a completely fresh radio, you'll probably find that there will be nothing in any of those fields. It will all be completely empty. So you'll notice that it's identified it as a Baofeng UV5R, but this config is currently untitled at the moment. So what you need to do is, it would be a good idea to save this. So now that you've downloaded the config, as it says, it's good to make a backup so you have that starting point for where to go back to. You click as, file, and then save as. And the good thing about CHIRP is it will automatically populate the file name. So it will give you that it's a Baofeng UV5R, and it will date stamp it with the date that you've downloaded it. So, and again, it's in format of year, month, day. If you're happy with that, it's usually a good place to start. Just say, yep, I'm happy with that. Let's save that config. And there you go. And you now notice that once you've saved it, it's now put up there, and that's the name of the image file that you're working on. So that is the one that you've just downloaded from the radio, and you're now ready to start editing. Okay, so a quick word on configuring your radio. Try and keep it logical. It's just like, think about how you're going to use the radio. Remember that some of the cheaper radios have very limited memory on them, so you need to work out how you want to use it. Not particularly great screen grab of my radio, but just so that you can try and understand it. The way I did mine, I had 128 memory channels to use. So obviously it's capable of UHF and VHF. So what I did was I split it, so the first 64 channels are all going to be VHF, the second 64 channels are going to be UHF. So the way I did it was I programmed starting at 0 with all of the simplex channels all the way down. So obviously it's got the old S channels and the new V channels. Obviously the old simplex channels started off being 25 kilohertz wide, and then they were then reduced to 12.5. And so it's got them all in there. And then once I've done that, I put in all of the common repeater frequencies, and then I actually then started off putting some repeaters in there. And then obviously, because I've got limited space, the chances of me using this radio too far away from Swindon or the local area is probably slim. So the repeaters that I put in there are the ones in the local geographical area, because they're probably going to be the most useful for me. And then once I put them in, I then did exactly the same on the starting from channel 65. I then put in all the simplex channels for UHF, the repeater frequencies on UHF, and then put in the some common local repeaters for this area. And because I'm nosy, the last few channels I filled up with the business light radio frequencies and the PMR frequencies, so I can listen to the local security at the shopping centre.
Just a thought that occurs to me there, Don. If you go and buy yourself a digital handy,
Yeah.
you end up getting a code plug, and the chances are that code plug you can just pop straight into your radio, and it will be pre-configured with masses of frequencies that you probably won't use.
Yeah.
Has anybody actually done anything in the social media area of making CHIRP configs for a given radio available so that people can just download them and save themselves that?
You can.
Green frequencies from CHIRP, because I downloaded them just to come up with them.
Yeah, you have to search for them. I can't think of any specific group, but I know that things like some of my my CHIRP images I have shared. For example, on my Yaesu FT8800, I have programmed in all of the UK analog repeaters in there, which is quite a nice thing to have, you know, because there's plenty of memory on the FT8800, which is enough to hold all of them. And so I've put those in, and then I've then shared that image on several sites so that other people don't have to go through the hassle of.
But there's nothing formal.
No,
Yeah,
not.
Then I've done this one. 164
Yeah.
I've done one for the Bayer thing, and it covers the amateur radio ones it might use, the other utilities that might use Wilson, all those in there. So if you've got a Bayer thing, you use that. Everyone uses it.
Yeah.
So organisations do it.
Yeah.
Use.
Exactly. So, just a quick note on, depending on which radio you're programming, the actual field names may look slightly different. So on the top is the Bayer UV5R, and on the bottom is the Yaesu FT8800. And if you have a look, The Baofeng has some slightly more fields, and on the Yaesu, some of the fields are very slightly different. For example, if you look at the power on the Baofeng, you have high and the other option is low. And on the Yaesu, there's actually 4 settings. There's low, mid 1, mid 2, and high. So just be prepared that there are going to be different fields. So what you probably want to then start doing is editing stuff in there. Now, editing is really easy in there. Literally, you go to the field that you want to change. So in this example, I'm changing the memory location 107, which I actually have set to TD. And on the recent frequency change, and then frequency change back again, I was doing a lot of changes on that field. Yeah. You literally double click onto that field and you type in what you want. So the frequency, the receive frequency, you just type it in there in megahertz, and that's that. The name field, basically you can just double click on that and you can type in there on the UV5R, it will accept 7 characters. That is how it will appear on the screen once you've programmed it in. So when you tune to channel 107 in the memory of your radio, that is exactly what will show up on the screen. Other fields will have drop down, and you click on that and then you can select an option. So on the tone mode, you've got a couple of options, and which we'll get to this in a minute. And also on the tone squelch, you have a couple of preset options in there. When you click on there, it will present you with a list. You can't free type into those. You have to select whatever it tells you to select, or whatever options you want. So, just to quickly recap on what all the fields mean. Frequency, this is the frequency you want the radio to receive on. This is not the receive or input frequency of the repeater. Again, the reason I say it, you may think, well, that's fairly obvious. The number of people that I have seen or helped out because they thought that that was the repeater's frequency and they've got all a bit confused. So, but that in frequency, that is the one that you want to be receiving on your radio. That is the frequency you want to receive on. Name, as I just said, that's how it will appear on the screen on the radio when you select that channel. Tone mode, this is associated with your CTCSS settings for repeater operation, and it can either be tone or tone squelch. Now, some people may disagree with me here, but I've always found that using the tone squelch option is better than using the tone one, and I've had it work a couple of times where it won't work properly when just using tone. Don't know why, whether it's a setup on the repeater or whatever, but I always use tone squelch and it seems to work.
There are two different mechanisms.
Yeah.
One's CTCSS, the other one's just
the access tone, yeah.
Not all repeaters still spot.
No, exactly, which is why.
Is that the case, or isn't one just puts the tone on transmit and the other one puts it on transmit and receive?
And receive, yeah.
So if you put it just on tone,
So-
which you need for the
Yeah, that will lift
that
it.
will open the repeaters, but it won't
Was-
stop the beacon.
Yeah,
You put it on tone squelch.
yeah.
It's on the receiver as well, so it stops you hearing the beacon.
Beacon, yeah.
The beaconing doesn't have the tone
No,
on it.
yeah. So, well, there you go, which is, again, a good reason to put it on tone squelch, because it will also confirm that you can receive that repeater. Obviously, if you change to one in a different geographical location, it means you'll be able to hear the beaconing off of the repeater. Again, the tone squelch setting, that is the frequency of the subaudible tone that that the repeater wants for you to be able to to open up the repeater. So you just select that frequency in there. And so that's, that's the tone that is transmitted. The duplex, again, this is for when you're working repeater. It's actually the shift on the repeater. It'll either be plus or minus. So basically, obviously, you know, on repeaters, they operate on an input frequency and there's an output frequency. This tells you what the shift between the two are.
On that duplex, in my graph, I thought I read somewhere that there's a setting that you can switch off transmit. That can be plus, minus, or something like nil or something.
Yeah.
So
Even if you press a button, nothing happens.
No. If you take the plus and minus off, it's operating on simplex, so you will transmit on that frequency and you will receive on the same frequency. That's when you're using simplex, yeah. But on the repeater side of things, you have to have that shift in there because all repeaters work on a frequency shift, yeah. Okay, so yeah, and so the offset is, as we just discussed, obviously they operate on two different frequencies, and the offset is whatever the difference in the frequencies is. So in the example we got up the top there, 0.6 is basically 600 kilohertz between the two. Mode is generally for FM. You usually get two settings. On the Baofeng, it's either FM, which is actually wide FM, or NFM, which is narrow FM. For repeater operation, I have found using narrow FM is better. I've actually done some tests with a couple of the local amateurs, including Rob, G4XUT, and between us, we've worked out that it is actually better to have them set to narrow FM. It tends to make your audio a lot more punchy on the repeater, so it can be heard better. So
You shouldn't be using wide FM.
no,
You're exceeding
the bandwidth here. Yeah.
Well, it depends on the radio, because there's different radios. On a Baofeng, wide is 5 kilohertz deviation and narrow is 2.5 kilohertz deviation. That's what we do, you're switching. That's what wide narrow is. It's not like wide FM, broadcast FM that we're talking about. It's a different entirely. But that's just radio dependent. Every radio could be different. But generally, usually
so it's sensible to use narrow.
it's usually 2.5 kilohertz for narrow and 5 kilohertz for wide.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. And the last thing is the power setting. So this will, you can set the transmit output. Obviously on the Baofeng it's either high or low, which is either 5 watts, I think, and 5 and 2.5, I think it is on the Baofeng. There's the 5 and 1. Yeah, it's but yeah, because some of the Baofengs actually have 3 settings. There's an UV82 which has 3 settings, which is 8 watt, 5 watt, and I think 2 watt or something. But yeah, obviously be sensible with that. On the handheld, probably running it at high power is probably fine. It's a handheld. If you're driving around in your car with, like for example with me, with my Yaesu FT8800, I don't really want to be pumping out 50 watts into the repeater all the time. It's pointless. I live, fairly close to the repeater. For the likes of WH and TD, and it's just pointless using excessive power to get into the repeater when I can get into them on 5 watts. So again, when you're programming them up, think about that, because it's just pointless running excessive power when you don't need to. Okay, quick reminder about repeater operation. And this is what you'll see why I've put this sort of slide in there. There is 2 sources that people generally use for repeater information. On the left is the Repeater Book app, and on the right is the web page for the UK repeaters provided by the RSGB. If you note, same repeater, GB3AA, which is the one in Bristol. On here it says the receive is 145.66.250. On here, it's a bit difficult to receive, but it says the receive is 145.06.25. That tends to confuse a lot of people, but the way to remember it is the repeater book app is looking at it from the perspective of your radio. So you want to be receiving on this frequency and you want to be transmitting it on this frequency. On the RSGB repeater website, it sees it from the repeater's perspective. So it is expecting to receive your signal on 145.06.25, which is what you're transmitting on, and it will be outputting on 145.66.25, which is what you will be receiving on. So it's easy to get confused. A lot of people get confused if they get their information from the RSGB website because they don't realise it's from the repeater's perspective. So once you've finished editing the config, you now want to save it back to the radio. So before you do anything else, I would suggest saving all the changes that you've made into a new file. So you'll have the original file that you started off with, that you downloaded off the radio, and then you'll have the new file with your new settings in them. So click on Save As, and again, it will automatically populate this with the name and the date. But as you can see, I have then appended a _new into it so that I know that that is the new configuration that I have just changed. So once you've changed that, save it, and as you'll see, the name has now changed to the configuration which I've appended with the word new. And just to prove that the two configs are there, if you go back into your directory, you'll see the original one that I downloaded at 11:30 the other night, and then the new one that I created at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So once you've then you've saved that config, you now want to upload it to the radio. So click on Upload to Radio. And you'll notice this time, obviously the COM port, as long as you've not gone away, unplugged your USB port or anything else, it should still be the same, although you can change it on there. If for any reason it's a time between where you plug your USB in and it's changed the COM port number, you can still change it. But you'll notice you cannot change the vendor or the model, and that is because the information that you're on there is in the format for a Baofeng UV5R, so it won't allow you to change that. So have a look at that and click OK. Now I will say, remember the little splash screen that came up and said make sure your radio's turned on, blah 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 blah. That will, if you haven't disabled that, that will appear again. I've disabled it on mine, so I'm sort of jumping one slide if you like. And what you should see is the progress bar again, and it should start going across the screen, which then means it's now sending that information, your new information, back to the radio. And this time when it's doing it, the light should flash green, which means it's receiving the information back to the radio. That's it. You're all done. It's programmed. So, time for a quick demo.
I would at that stage always back download it and then just check it.
Yeah, you can download it, but
Not necessarily you see it on the radio.
so let's see if we can do.
Can you download it from one radio and then flow it into another one?
Yep, you can, as long as it's the same type of radio, which
It's
is
a different type.
sorry.
It's a different type.
No.
Like it's data.
So you can't.
I programmed a 5R and then I managed to put the same stuff into the new thing, which is the 8-watt version.
Yeah.
And it goes straight in.
Yeah.
It don't come from the drop-down list because they haven't put in the 8 version.
Yeah.
But it still works. So I've still called it a 5R, but it was still programmed.
Yeah, and that's a good point. One of the things with this is when you're selecting the radio. Now, if you happen to buy a Hokey Cokey 2000 and you go, hang on, that's not on the list of supported radios, the chances are it will be a clone of something else. Generally, it will be a clone of a UV5R or a UV82 or something along those lines. And so if it doesn't appear on the list, it becomes a bit of a trial and error thing whereby you select a vendor and then select a radio and then try and communicate with the radio. When we did this last month with a couple of months ago with the TD changeover, a couple of people bought in some weird and wonderful radios of makes of which I've never ever heard of. However, I was still able to program them because essentially inside them they were still a UV5R. So if you have some weird and wonderful radio, give it a try. Just select a vendor that you think it's probably going to be a clone of, and give it a try.
But make sure you've downloaded the previous one. If it's got anything.
Yeah. If it's got anything, if you communicate with it and it's got stuff on it, then save it off. Right. So.
Am I right in thinking the Yaesu is not a plug and play? You've got to press some buttons on the front panel to get it to work with CHIRP on the 8800 and the 8900. You've got to press
Yeah. So
the buttons on the
yeah. So
you've got to power it off and all buttons and power it back on.
yeah. So when it comes to programming certain radios, you will need to read some of the instruction books. So like with the 8800, you use what's known as the cloning feature on the Yaesu, which, because the Yaesu is actually designed to clone two like-for-like radios. So if you have two FT8800s, one of them's already programmed, you can plug them in pretty much back to back. It will clone one setting from one radio to the other. And all CHIRP is doing is effectively simulating the other FT8800. So yeah, for some radios, you just need to read how you do. Sorry?
There's usually an extra menu.
Yeah.
Special menu.
Yeah, it's in the manual. It will tell you exactly how to do it, and we'll pretty much go through what I did on there. So if you remember, the first thing we did was let's find device manager. That's fairly clear. And there we go. There are the COM ports that are in there. So I'm now going to plug in my and because I deliberately reset the driver for purpose of demonstration, you see that it's got that problem again, yep, where it says it's not communicating properly. So you right click on there and go into properties and go to the driver tab. You'll see that it's got that new driver on there. So go to update the driver, browse my computer, and then pick a list of drivers. And there you can see that it's got that driver that I know that works. So I just select that driver.
John, where is that actually hidden?
Sorry? when you download the prolific drivers and run the install for them, it usually puts them in the Windows System 32 folder, but you don't need to know that, because as soon as you install them, the computer becomes aware of them and it knows that they're on there, but you need to run the install on those drivers. Okay, so select that driver. It says that it's installing that driver. It says that it's done. I'll close that window, and then hey presto, it's now working. So driver's installed. We know that works. We know it's on COM port 21. Radio is turned off. Plug it in. Turn it on. And close that, and let's fire up CHIRP. This is where I'm anticipating something going wrong, because live demos are never good. So first thing we wanted to do, we've got the radio switched on, CHIRP's running, everything else should be working. We want to download from radio.
So I take that back down again, like I was messing about what I was doing. Just take the pot out, see if that helps. There we are. How's that?
Yep. Thank you. Okay, so as you can see, at some stage I've used COM port 22 on there, but we know that the COM port we wanted to use was 21. So this is showing you, this is the list of all the COM ports, but we know from when I installed the software, the prolific driver was on COM port 21. So select COM port 21. Just to show you, so in the list of vendors, this is the list of all the various vendors that you've got on there, all the common ones, Yaesu, TYT, blah, 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 etc., etc. You have all of the main ones, Kenwood, ICOM, they're all in there. But we're going to do Baofeng UV5R. So we selected the vendor, and then if we go to select the radio, as you can see, it lists all the various different types of the Baofeng radios in there. So, yeah, but as I say, most of them, if it doesn't list your radio, just what? Sorry. What
forums will tell you the nearest equivalent?
Yeah. So once you've done that, selected the radio, click on OK, and there you go. And as I said, there's a red light flashing on there to show that it's downloading it from the radio. And there you go, it's received it. And so here you can probably see better how I've laid out the memory on here. So as I say, I've put in all the VHF simplex channels with their old name and new name, because we all know that there's a few G's who don't like to use the V, who don't like to use... Yeah, exactly. So obviously the calling channel is known as S20, which if you're supposed to call it by its proper name, it's now V40. But if you said to someone, see you on V40, yeah, exactly. They think, yeah, precisely. So as you can see, as I went down, as I got down to after putting in the repeater frequencies, I then put in a whole load of the local repeaters that I'm possibly likely to use in there, obviously including WH, SN down in Southampton, down that way somewhere. Farnham, that's it, yeah. In there. And then after that, I then started the rest of it from channel 65 onwards, did exactly the same with the UHF frequencies. And as you can see, I slightly changed or added some additional characters into the calling channel, as in U280, and then put CL, meaning calling channel, just to remind me that that is the simplex calling channel. And then again, all the way through, and put in some repeaters. And then right at the very end, there's the PMR frequencies and the business radio light, as they call it, frequencies. So as you can see, it says untitled up the top. So what you can do is click Save As, and as you can see, it's automatically given it today's date on there and identified it as a UV5R configuration. So save that, and it's now changed the name at the top, and I can now go in and make any changes that I want to. One thing that I didn't cover in the slides, but I'll quickly cover it now. As well as doing your memory channels, you can do some other settings in here. Like for example, I think it's on, no, where is it? Other settings. There you go. You can change, when you power your radio on, it gives you like a startup message on there, and mine comes up and it says power on message. It says DOM1, which means I've got 2 UV5Rs, and it means I can identify between 1 and 2. On the other one, obviously, it comes up and says DOM2, and it's got my call sign in there as well. There's other settings in here that you can play around with. And one of the important ones, let me just find it in here, is the timeout. When you get a UV5R, the timeout is set to extremely short. And so you'll be halfway through a rag chew on TD, and the thing will beep at you and it will time out. So go in there and change that setting in there. I think I've set it to the longest setting that is possible, but even that's not long enough to actually time out the repeater. So 600 seconds, I can't, what's Tony?
WH is 5 minutes.
Oh, is it 5? Oh, yeah, so it will. But the repeater will time out before my radio does. But so you can change that in there. Generally, I don't do 5-minute overs anyway. But yeah, so there's some other settings that you can change in there as well.
And also these are only available through CHIRP. You can't program these.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, so things like the I think the startup message. I can't remember whether you can change that in without CHIRP.
There's a PID as well.
Yeah.
Which is for not necessarily meant to be used for ham radio, but there's a few of those you can put in there.
Yeah, yeah. So there's various other settings in there. Obviously, you can change screen colours between when you're transmitting, if that floats your boat. So you can make them in there. So anyway, make all your changes. When you're finished doing your changes, like I said, do a save as. So for example, pretending I've made some form of changes in there, I then just append that with _new and save that back. And as you can see, it's now saved that as a new file with a new file name. Once you've done that, you want to send it back to the radio. So click on upload to radio. COM port 21, which is the COM port I was using, is already there. And then you can just, as long as you're happy with that, click on OK. And you see it's now progressing along. And as I mentioned, that's now flashing green, which now means that it's now sending that information back to the radio. And then just one thing to note is once it's sent, the radio reboots itself. There you go, it's just rebooted itself, and then that's it ready to use. And that's that.
Well, I got to say, he's the chairman, so he can't do this. You know, that I found was a very thorough very deep look at CHIRP programming, particularly with regard to the driver bits, because that's something that people struggle with. So that was great, Don, from start to finish. Well done.
Thank you.
Anybody get any more questions for Don? You've dealt with it all, you see.
I was just going to say, I mean, you had the PMR frequencies
Yeah.
you programmed in. There was something I saw come up on a forum the other day, that a lot of the Chinese cheaper handhelds, they will transmit all over the
Yes.
place.
Yes.
Just to say that it is illegal to transmit using one of those type of radios on a
On PMR. Yeah, absolutely. That's why I said when I programmed them, I said it's because I'm nosy and I like to listen into them.
Yours was set to high power on those 3 frequencies.
Yeah, that's because I set that as a default.
They will not talk.
I say Wessex Hall before have programmed a lot of the route ones that the Barefangs that their members have got with all the frequencies of the adjacent. Who is it? Who is that other organisation they use for setting up medical stuff and scenarios? The S20 is one. Is it S20 is one? There's one called S20. There's another one, but they've got their own radio frequencies. And Wessex Hall before have programmed all anybody that's got a Barefank to pick those up as well. So it is useful that you can go outside the amateur radio if it is legal and justified.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Any other?
Okay, that was great, Don. Thank you very much.
Thank you.